Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and talk about what we are doing from a very, I think, quite a different perspective in Minnesota with our TANF program. So what I'm going to kind of go over is the different, there we go. Sorry, I'm trying to get my notes up. Talk about our measures that we use in our TANF program called Minnesota Family Investment Program. It's called the Self-Support Index. I'm going to go through why we decided to use this measure, what we do with the results of this measure, what we see as the strengths and challenges of it, how we're going about improving the measure, and lastly, some things that we've learned from using this measure in operationalizing it. I'll just note that, this is very, very different than what Bosch and Michael were talking about. This is a very tight measure of participants, adult participants in our TANF program, but it has some similarities in that it's looking at their ability to exit the program and in some parts their earnings. So moving forward, so what the self-support index is it's a measurement that it takes place over time. So we look at all of the adults that were on TANF in a given quarter, and we see what's happening with them 3 years later. And we call them a success if they're not receiving any cash assistance anymore in the state of Minnesota, or if they happen to still be receiving cash if they're working 30 hours per week. Under those two conditions, we consider that person a success. There are a few more kind of caveats to that, but that's very detailed. Operationally, what I do is, when I finish up a quarter, so we finished the first quarter 2020, I will look back to the first quarter, 2017, and see who was on, it was adults on our TANF program then, and then compare them to who was eligible in the first quarter 2020. And that's how I calculate individuals' likelihood of success. So this is for individuals. Once we have an individual's self-support index results, we aggregate this to the local agency. Minnesota is a state-supervised, county-administered TANF program. So the self-support index is a way to understand performance at a local agency level. So what it is the percent of adults who are successful on the self-support index of the number of adults on TANF 3 years earlier. Each agency gets a score. And I keep saying agencies because we report outcomes for counties, who are the majority of the local agencies who implement TANF programs, but also some tribal agencies also implement TANF in Minnesota, as well as county consortia. So it's, for local agencies, it's a very simple score, the percent of people who were successful on the self-support index 3 years later. But what does that matter so much? Everybody gets their individual score. What does that mean? Who's doing good? Who's doing bad? It's a little bit hard to tell. So one of the real innovations of the self-support index was that we develop a customized range of self-support index scores that each local agency should fall within. This is rather than having some sort of arbitrary guideline, saying 75% of people should be successful, or 50% of adults should be successful. The way we do this is we generate the range using a regression adjustment, and we include lots of demographic characteristics about the household and the local economy to basically predict individuals' likelihood of being successful or not on the self-support index. And we sort of do a bootstrapping process where we resample from that population of people of participants to generate thousands of predictions of what each agency would have, and out of that distribution we say this is your range of expected performance. And whether somebody, I should pause, so whether somebody falls below, an agency can fall then below the range, above the range, or within the range. I think that I have a polling question now. So here it is. What percent of local agencies, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that you do have a polling question. You're good.
I do. So what percent of local agencies do you think were able to meet or exceed the predicted self-support index range? All right. So it looks like people are ending up around 63%. So if we can go to the next slide. So people on average are saying about 78% of you say 63% of the counties were able to meet or exceed the range. So this chart here shows the every county and county consortium in the state and their results. Apologies, it's a little bit small. But actually, it was more like 83% of agencies or counties are able to meet or exceed their self-support index range. And you can see there's sort of dispersion all around the state. A lot of places are within, that's that blue. The kind of brown is below. And you see it's kind of scattered around the state. There's not really clear geographic patterns here maybe, and this changes a lot. And there's a typo. This was not quarter 44, which would be deep into the future, but quarter 4, 2019. These are those results. Kind of another way to look at these results on the self-support index is kind of more directly at the range. This chart shows the ranges of agencies below, within, and above. And you can see the x-axis in this case would be different agencies, and I just haven't put their names there. The bars indicate the ranges for each agency, and the kind of circle indicates what their actual score was. And you can see that, that the ranges can really, really vary across the different agencies, coming from very, very low ranges, anywhere from below 50 to 56%, all the way up to very high ranges of, more almost, slightly below 80%, almost up to 90%. And agencies are able to score above, below, and within in all different locations of ranges. So why did we develop the self-support index? It was initially a response to the work participation rate. The work participation rate captures activities of participants on TANF, but doesn't really reflect their outcomes. And so, a group of state people working in the state and local agencies got together to sort of develop this measure. They had a desire to create a measure that focused on participant outcomes rather than their sort of just activities within the TANF program. And they wanted something that focused more on self-sufficiency and reduced use of cash assistance. Lastly, there was interest in developing a measure that took into account local conditions that were out of control of the local agencies that were implementing the programs. As I mentioned, this measure was developed in collaboration between state, local agencies, and academics, in particular the Department of Human Services and Minnesota's Department of Employment and Economic Development, as well as counties, tribes, employment service agencies, and University of Minnesota also supported developing the measure. More recently, we've continued this collaboration with stakeholders. I've traveled all over the state training frontline workers and managers on implementing on the self-support index, going to probably more than half the counties in the state by now. Local agencies can also access information about participants who will be included in upcoming measures of the self-support index. So they can look and see, okay, what what participants do I have now who are going to be measured in the next quarter for the self-support index? What are short-term things that I can help them do to increase their, hours they're working, or, helping to agencies to focus on those people? And lastly, we've done some work that I'll talk about in a little bit to improve the measure. And a lot of this has come from feedback from stakeholders that we've gathered, both during our trainings and in discussions, as well as kind of specially coordinated events to hear feedback from people. I know that I have another poll, but I can't quite remember what it is. Okay. As I will say this right now, but if local agencies are held accountable to their range, if they're above, they get fiscal bonuses, and if they're below, they can have they might have to provide plans to improve performance, or there have been some fiscal penalties. And in addition, the self-support index also determines allocation of some TANF funds to local agencies. So how would you feel as some of you are answering this, if your local agency and your funding was tied to meet the goal, would you want it to be or no? Oh, it's quite a split decision everybody is having. I think it's probably right. If you think that you're going to get a bonus, you probably do want it. It can be very tricky, and we've seen with our agencies, some agencies seem to be doing a lot of work to try to support people and still end up below their range, and other places don't have to do much and end up above. So this is an area that's been a particular challenge for us, and that we continue to struggle with. So one of the strengths of the self-support index is that it does account for local conditions. So, we include in the measure, things like the race and ethnicity of the participants. It includes things like the unemployment rate of the county that is being measured. It includes household characteristics. And one of the good things about this is it also kind of adjusts through time. So, one of the adjustment factors is the unemployment rate in the kind of quarter 3 years later. So, when we are coming up to this quarter, when we see much, much, much higher unemployment rates, the self-support index will automatically sort of adjust for that factor built into the range. In addition, since it's compared to sort of the averages across the state, it also, if everybody's self-support index gets lower, that will adjust lower for everybody else in the state. Some other kind of strengths of this is that, some other measures of TANF, for example, really focus on people exiting and their jobs to which they're exiting. The self-support index looks at everybody, every adult, every caregiver on TANF in the state. So it doesn't really, it accounts for everybody, people who are using TANF as a type of unemployment insurance, who use it as a bridge between, losing a job and getting a new job. But it also captures people who may be exiting the workforce for good because of disability or some other family situation. It captures those people as well who are also participants in the TANF program. I think that I have one more poll. Let's see. Is there one more? Okay.
Yes, there is.
If you were the head, oh, I see it. Thank you. Thank you. If you were the head of agency head, would you find this simple or easy to understand? Everybody's finding it very clear. It's great. All right. Well, this is quite exciting. I think you should come and talk to all of our agency leads in the different counties, because I think they would they would strongly disagree with you based on my experience with them. They find this very, very confusing, the measure. They find it hard to know what to do to kind of adjust their practices to meet the range, because that 3-year time perspective is very challenging for them. And they're not sure how what they do will affect the results. One small technical issue is that the self-support index is like this composite of, leaving TANF and or being on but working. And you might think that the relationships between underlying characteristics and those might differ. Or the activities you would do with a participant might differ to reach those different kinds of outcomes. So we've done a lot of work to try to improve the ranges by bringing in new information about participants, in particular information about their length of utilization of TANF. We've also changed some methods to improve the prediction methods and to improve the ranges more generally. We're working to roll these out, but the pandemic, has definitely changed our timetable for when we'll be rolling out these changes, or at least our communication plans. Lastly, we're also working with the TANF Data Collaborative to develop a dashboard and more data about to help agencies learn about the self-support index and learn more about their caseload in general. Some of the lessons we've learned that, continuing engaging with stakeholders, as always, is really, really important. That learning what they think what is missing, learning about what their questions are is really, really important, especially because sometimes we can bring in information to people that they might not know. For example, I went to one local agency and I had seen that, Somali participants in their area were performing much lower than the state average, and it turned out that a processing plant in the area had closed. So, that was a good piece of knowledge for us at the state and a good way to help them understand the self-support index and how it works. The financial penalties seem to be working against that collaboration. Local agencies really, really focus on those, but they don't know how they can improve yet, and we still are trying to learn about how to do that. Another big lesson, which I mentioned before, is that not all TANF participants are workers. Some of them are leaving the workforce. Some of them are taking a break from the workforce, but they need TANF as a sort of bridge. It's important to think of models that, going to some of the earlier presenters' points, and incorporate racial inequities into it and incorporate disparities so that we can correctly capture that if we're going to operationalize a measure. And one last thing is that, when I've done presentations on this to local agencies, sometimes I remember once somebody just said, this doesn't make any sense, it's not fair. And, to me, it's, as fair as you're going to get, and that all measures are imperfect, but we should be always engaged in trying to improve them so that they tell as truthful a story about people's efforts and understanding the population as possible. So thank you all very much. Please feel free to, if you have any questions for me, ask away or email me at any time.